let's look at the plan, and we'll focus on a little more on how it flows in and out of the context of a note. The plan from last week flows forward to the plan from this week, and then of course it flows on into the future. The way we currently have our system set up is that all plans exist within the context of today's encounter or prior encounters and flow forward. Your data model may be separate. I would recommend that when you write out what your progress note is, write it out similar to this and then break it down into boxes. Figure out what can be turned into a template field. Okay. Information also flows from other sources. HL7 feeds, of course, flow into your flow sheet, into your results, but they can also flow directly into your lab field. Now, how do you do that? That's done by bookmarks. And working more with Steve or with Bill Stahl, we can show you how to make bookmarks that will pull your labs into your lab result box. So again, we're trying to avoid that having to go over to the flow sheet to see my recent results. Then, of course, lab results from August add to the template in September, which add to the template in October, and now we've got a whole string of lab results. You can define when you want things to fall off the lab results task or the lab results box and when to add them. And then finally, those lab results then flow out. So now we're talking about putting it all together, potentially an HL7 feed from a year ago, which flowed into the note a year ago, now flowing to referring MD a year later, after having been combined with the accumulated results from that year. You can see it's what we call a combinatorial explosion of different functions working together to really improve efficiency. I would hearken back to that major boo-boo that I made with the CC box, where I CC'd the doctor that had just been fired by the patient. So be careful. It's important to read the entire note before you send it off. So the keys of what we've talked about. A note is really just a static snapshot of a collection of template fields, those fields which flow in time, but it all comes together for the right now. The static note interconnects the past and the future. Some things in the past flow directly to the future. Sometimes they drop off information into your progress note. And really the progress note it's not irrelevant anymore. It's still a relevant piece of information, but it's really defying the entropy of all the information that's flowing in our EMRs. It's trying to capture it in one place. I think it is still relevant, but it's really not the focus of how we think about information anymore, flowing. It's just one of the terminals of information. Okay. So the notes are linked together. I want to talk a little bit about autofill. I'm actually going to just read this and see if we can understand it. Now this is where, Steve, you can chime in if this has changed. Autofill. If automatic autofill is not set in user preferences, the user can still have autofill fill the controls that are marked to be autofilled by selecting the menu link at the top of patient notes autofill. Now I was told never to repeat the same word in the sentence more than one. This allows for filling of the new note with values from the last note of the same type, fill from template, or from the last note with the matching field names across all templates, fill from filled values. Unfortunately, the verbiage in 4.4 is not the same. When they say fill from note values, they really mean fill from the last template. When they say template definition, they mean fill from field values. So here are the screens that involve autofill. Over to the right is the the properties of that box, where you click or don't click the autofill values. That's where you enable it, make it required. Click or don't click the autofill values. If you click the autofill values, that means that when autofill is clicked in a note, that's one of the fields that says, oh yeah, I can be autofilled. So you could disable that, for instance, if you feel that flowing forward the the past medical or the physical exam information is never appropriate, you could say don't ever autofill that. Over to the left in your user preferences, for me, gives you options for chart note autofill. It's about the 4th line down, chart note autofill. Do I want to fill my note from the last note, or do I want to fill my note from the last time that template field was ever used? And then to remind you, up in the patient note at the top where you can save it and auto-link it, you can click the autofill button. I find this to be unbelievably complicated, and my advice is simply to go to a patient's chart, a fake patient. We use the Flintstones, so we have Barney and Betty, and we mess around with it and see how it behaves, because basically it can't be explained. You have to go around and play with it. You have to play with it. And I would say that for a lot of this flow forward stuff, before you implement it in your practice, play with it, or you're going to get angry doctors and maybe angry patients. My advice number 2. Because of the complexities of all of these things and where things flow, we generally have avoided building a lot of templates. In the mid-90s, I worked with Kaiser Permanente and IBM, and we created an EMR, and we built 2,000 templates. And now, here we are in 2008, and we have basically one template in my practice, one progress note template. The reason for that is this concept of configuration management. This is another concept that comes from, I think it comes from the software world. What it means is, if you have a program that's a computer program that's being designed by multiple different programmers who are working on different pieces of it, they have to coordinate their work. And if programmer A is on version 1 and programmer B is on version 2.2, you've got a configuration problem. At some point, those configurations have to come together to work. Where this becomes a problem with multiple templates, if you use these template fields and they do certain things, and you have 50 templates, but then you decide, oh no, that template field doesn't work anymore, or it needs to work a different way, you potentially have to change that template field in 50 different templates. So the solution is to not have a lot of templates, or else to use a lot of subnotes. The problem with using subnotes is that if you force the provider to create the note as they're going by adding a bunch of subnotes, it's a lot of screen refreshes, and it may slow them down too. So we just have chosen to create one long note. If you don't care about a section of the note, you skip it. And of course, in the printout, it's skipped also. We combine that with not a lot of checkboxes, a lot of drop-down boxes, and a lot of acronyms. The acronym function in this system is, it's macros, right? And it's really fabulous. That's where we get the customization, so that if I want to write my physical exam one way, or my physical exam always includes neuro, but my partner's physical exam never includes neuro, use an acronym for that. Get an acronym naming dogma that you use, and proliferate acronyms all over the place. I would advise, do not proliferate template fields, and do not proliferate progress note templates. It sounds like from the groans and stuff that people have been through that also, and creating 2,000 templates. Even creating 5 templates is logarithmically more complex, a configuration management problem, than having one template. So this is the end of the advice section. I put this here because it reminds me that if I keep going, I'll start giving parenting advice, which I did yesterday. Does anybody have any children less than 2, or going to have children less than 2? No television till the age of 2, 0. And everybody else is thinking, oh geez, I screwed that one up. Right? Well, you can still get back. Don't buy a car with a TV in it. Okay? This causes attention deficit problems.